Well, what do we do when life gets really overwhelming? When the forces of life turn against us and we get desperate? What do we do when life unexpectedly gets out of control? Well, I want us to look at a story that takes place on a lake in a storm with some terrified men who are in a boat and their life is out of control. We've been saying that Jesus is the clearest expression of God that we will ever see in this life. What we see in Jesus, we find in God. Jesus is God incarnate, God come to be known and seen and touched. And remember in this series on the great miracles of Jesus that there are three kinds of miracles. There are miracles of healing of physical illnesses. There are miracles in the spiritual world of casting out the demons. And there are miracles of the power which Jesus demonstrates over nature itself. And in this story, Jesus reveals his power over the natural laws of the world. And in it, he demonstrates both the immanence and the transcendence of God. Now, I want us to understand these concepts. The immanence of God is the presence of God, the nearness of God, the closeness of God. The transcendence of God is the holy otherness of God, that our God is a big God, an all-powerful God, that he is distant and far removed from us. I like to think of it this way. Our God is an all-loving God, an immanent God, and he is an all-powerful God, a transcendent God. So let's turn to the story and see what Mark has to say about the immanence and the transcendence of God when we find ourselves in a situation where life is out of control. Mark writes these words in chapter 4, verse 35 of his gospel. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, and just as he was in the boat, there were also other boats with him. It's evening. After several days of teaching, Jesus is absolutely exhausted. He needs a break. So he sends the great crowd who is following him, because everybody wants to see Jesus at this point, because of his teaching, and he teaches it in authority, exousia, and because of the healing and the miracles that he has been doing. So everybody wants to see Jesus, but Jesus sends the crowd home. And he tells his closest followers, his apostles, his disciples, let's go over to the other side of the lake. And then we read in verse 37 of chapter 4, a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Imagine this evening. It's a beautiful, crystal clear night. The candlelight of the villages dot the shoreline. There's a fresh breeze. They launch out. Jesus lies down on a pillow in the stern of the boat and quickly falls asleep. Now, let's take a look at Lake Galilee for just a moment. Where are we here? Well, Lake Galilee is a large body of water. It's 13 miles long and 6 miles wide at the headwaters of the Jordan River. It's known for its warm springs that create ideal conditions for fishing. That's why Peter lived there in Capernaum on Lake Galilee. But it's also located between two high ridges that's shaped like a giant wind tunnel that compresses the air and quickly turns calm waters into raging storms. Peter has been watching the skies. He is a seasoned fisherman. He knows everything about this body of water, and he doesn't like the look of things. He's aware that this lake is known for its fierce, sudden storms that whip up with terrific fury. And then, without notice, a furious squall strikes the boat. And they're all in great danger. It's dark, it's damp, it's cold. The lake is very, very deep. They're afraid, Mark tells us. They know that people have died on this lake, alone and far from rescue. Isn't it amazing how quickly life can get out of control? We're sailing along, cool breeze, clear skies, and all of a sudden, wham! Unexpectedly, out of nowhere, a storm hits our life. And we wonder, what happened? We feel like we're going under. And I know that many of us know exactly what those men felt like in that boat that night. Out there all alone in a raging storm, an unexpected storm. They don't know what's going to happen next. They know that life isn't supposed to be this way. And we've all experienced what happened during COVID, that unexpectedly it disrupted all of our lives. It destroyed many lives. People died. It was unexpected. Businesses went out of business. With all of our technology and science and understanding, it hit us blindsided. Isn't it amazing how the unexpected storms come sweeping into our lives? Well, Mark continues the story in verse 38. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Now, my guess is that their first reaction when this storm comes sweeping into their lives is, "We can handle this. We've been through storms before. We're smart enough. We're tough enough. We're fishermen." I mean, it's hard for a fisherman to ask a carpenter for help in a boat in a storm. After all, what does Jesus know about a lake and boats and storms? What does he know about those things? But then there's chaos in the boat. They recognize that the power of the storm is more than they anticipated. They're far from rescue. They're desperate. They're out of options. They have used up all of their resources. They're powerless. So, as a last resort, someone says, "We're going to have to wake up Jesus." I mean, it's hard to ask for help sometimes, especially when we think we know what we're doing. So they're going to have to wake him up, and they're going to have to yell at him and scream at him because of the roar of the storm and the violent wind. I can see them begin to shout and scream at Jesus. They have to ask for help. One of the hardest things that we can do is ask for help. I remember a friend telling me one time that he was having trouble with alcohol and he'd lost his business and lost his marriage and he was losing all of his life, and so he called the AA hotline. But he didn't want to admit it was his problem, so he said to the woman on the other end of the line, he said, "I have a friend who's in great trouble. He's lost his business and his job and his family, and he's losing his friends, and he can't control what he drinks. What would you recommend I tell him?" And after a pause and silence, the woman on the other end of the phone said, "Do you need help? Do you need help?" And he said, "Yeah, it's me, and I need help." I mean, it's hard to ask for help, but sooner or later, there is nothing like a big storm in a lake that presses us and takes us to a point beyond our ability to survive it. Do you need help? Now, interestingly, when they go to Jesus, notice what they say to him. They're upset. "Teacher, Lord, Rabbi, don't you care if we drown?" I mean, what's going on here? We've got a big problem. The boat is being tossed back and forth. It's filling with water, and you're asleep. Don't you care? Have you ever felt like that? I mean, where is God in all of this? Where is he? God doesn't care. He's distant and far removed. He's transcendent. I prayed, and no one answered. So they're wondering, don't you care about us? We understand your transcendence, but what about us? All your power. But do you care about me? Do you? Good question, isn't it? Well, Mark continues in chapter 4, verse 39. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Can you imagine the scene? He is soaking wet. He stands up in the boat. It's hard to stand in a boat that's being rocked back and forth in a fierce wind. He looks at the disciples. They look at him. Their eyes are wide open. They are scared to death. And then he speaks, and he said, "Quiet, be still." The Creator speaks to the created. I was there at the beginning. Wind and waves and seas. I called you into existence, ex nihilo, out of nothing, by my very word. He has this instant, absolute, sovereign power over the forces of nature. Here we're seeing this transcendence of God. And the wind comes to a screeching halt, and the waves stop, and there is dead silence. The sea is smooth as silk. The wind and the waves reveal the full identity of Jesus. He is a transcendent creator God. He is in charge of all nature. He has power over all nature. As we said, Jesus is the clearest expression of God we will ever see in this life. God incarnate, come to be known and seen and touched. And here we see the immanence of God, the nearness of God, the presence of God. He is in the boat. And we see the transcendence of God, the all-powerful God, the unknowable otherness of God. I mean, what good is it to have an immanent, near God if he doesn't have any power? If there's no transcendence? Our God is both an immanent, in the boat God, who is transcendent and has power over nature itself. No other human being has this kind of power over nature. I remember when our kids were young and we'd pull into the driveway and I used to play with them and I would say, "Garage door, open!" And I would secretly press the garage door button and it would open. And when we get in the garage, I would say, "Garage door, close!" And it would close and they would be astounded. They thought I was superhuman, that I had supernatural powers. Well, it didn't take them long to figure out what I was doing because they searched the car and watched me very carefully the next time that happened. But I don't have power over wind and waves. No human being has power over the raging seas. No human being has ever had this kind of supernatural power. Why? Because he is the creator God. So he has power over creation. It is unique to Jesus. He is in a class by himself. He outdistances all other religious leaders, whether it's Buddha or Confucius or Muhammad, because he has the power of creation. They're not creators. Any other religious leader, any other human being is not a creator of the universe. He has power over the forces of nature. They submit to him. They hear the voice of their creator. Our God is an immanent God. He is near and close. He's in the boat. And he's a transcendent God. He is an all-powerful God. Our God is an all-loving God. Our God is an all-powerful God. What good is an all-loving God that doesn't have power? What good is an all-powerful God that doesn't have love? This is the beauty of the tension and the wonder of the nature and the character of God as expressed here, this very moment in Jesus, that our God is an immanent, transcendent God. Now, the story concludes in Mark chapter 4, verse 40 with these words. And he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." He asks them, "Why are you afraid? Do you not know who I am?" It's a good question, isn't it? Do you know who I am? Do you have faith in me? Do you have trust in me? Can you trust me with your life? This is the question of faith in the storm. Now notice their reaction. Their reaction when he asked that question was that they became even more afraid. Their fear intensified. You would think that they would be more at peace. The storm is gone. The seas are calm. But when the storm was over, they were more terrified. They were more terrified than they were in the storm. Their fear magnified. They asked, "Who is this? Who are you?" They realize they are no longer in the presence of an all-powerful storm. They are now in the presence of an all-powerful God. And he is immanent. He is in the boat with them. And this realization terrified them. Okay, so what? What difference does this story make in your life and my life today and forever? Well, first, we see that Jesus asks them to get in the boat. He asks all of us to get in the boat with him. And when we get in the boat, we can expect powerful storms, swirling, blowing wind around us that threaten us. When we go somewhere with Jesus, we should always be prepared for the unexpected. We should always be prepared for a storm to come into our lives. Sometimes we think, well, now that we're with Jesus and he's in the boat with us, that we will always be protected. But Jesus never promised a smooth ride. He said, you will find trouble in this world. Expect it, anticipate it, but rest assured, for I have overcome the world. He simply said to them, get in the boat. Let's go somewhere on the other side. And he asks all of us to do that. Come and follow me. Get in the boat. We're going to go somewhere. I'm going to take you somewhere. And when I take you somewhere, this will not be the last storm that you will have to face. There are bigger storms on the horizon, on the other side. In fact, when they get to the other side, they're confronted with a legion of demons. Because Jesus has come to do battle with the spiritual world. At stake is the history of salvation of your life and mine. So Jesus says, first word, get in the boat with me. There's a second thing that Jesus says. Be quiet. Be still. Where is Jesus in the middle of the storm? Asleep? We feel like he's not around. He doesn't care. He's distant and far removed. No, not really. It doesn't matter what storm we're in right now. What matters is who is Jesus. The power of Jesus is greater than the power of the storm. And he is immanent. He is with us. He is near to us. He is in the boat, in the storm. And as he is near to us, he is transcendent, all-powerful. He cares, and he's in control. He's our loving God and our all-powerful God. He can speak to the storms in our lives. And the storm knows who he is, the Creator God, because his power is greater than the power of the storm. The storm is obedient to his voice. So wake him up. Go to him. Tell him about our doubts, our fears, what terrifies us in life, what's got us on the run. Wake him up. He wants to know. He wants to hear. I know he already knows. He's in the boat. He knows that there's a storm. He wants to hear the voice of his children come to him. He wants us to get to the point where we come to rely upon him in our lives. And so he can quiet the storm. Now, Jesus doesn't always take away the physical storms in our life today. He's not here physically with us in the boat. He's here spiritually. Inside of us, he dwells in us. Christ dwells in us. And what he can do in the midst of the storm is to quiet the storm in our inner core, in our inner circle. Here's what he does. He says, I know you're in a storm. I know you're terrified. I know you can't find your way out. I know it feels like there is an unknown future. But I can say to your soul, to your spirit, to your heart, to your mind, I can say, quiet. Be still. Do not be afraid. I am an all-loving God. I am an all-powerful God, and my spirit dwells in you. He speaks to our hearts and our minds. He speaks to the raging forces in our lives, and he says, be quiet. Be still. 1 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and a sound mind. So whatever storm we're in this moment, breathe in the Spirit of God. Hear him say, quiet. Quiet. Be still, my child. Do you not know who I am? There's a third word that we find in this story. Jesus says, get in the boat. Jesus says, quiet, be still. And those in the boat say, who is this? Who is this? Did you hear what I just heard him say? Did you see what I just saw? The wind and the waves obey him. And when you come to that understanding of who God is in his transcendent power, it's terrifying to us. The Bible over and over and over again speaks about the fear of God as the heart and the root of all knowledge and wisdom and understanding. That our God is an immanent God. He is in the boat with us. He loves us. He cares for us as his children. But he's a God that is not to be messed with. He is a transcendent, all-powerful creator God of the universe. When Moses received the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, it was in the context of thunder and lightning and of a great roar. God was terrifying the people with his power and his significance over them to get them to understand who he was. He's immanent. He's our all-loving God. He's in the boat with us. He's comforting. He's assuring. He's telling our souls and our spirits, quiet, be still. And he's transcendent. He's all-powerful. He's in control. He has a power that is greater than the storm itself. This is our God. The God who has come to be known, to reveal himself in Jesus. And when we have that kind of power in us, we don't have to worry or be afraid of the storm around us. Who is this God? He is our all-loving, immanent God. He is our all-powerful, transcendent God, who says to the deepest parts of our being, be quiet, be still. My prayer for you and for me as we think of this story, and we're in the boat, we're in the storm, Jesus is with us. And my prayer is that whatever storm that is that you or I are experiencing in this very moment, we can hear him say at the deepest parts of our being, quiet, be still. And I'd like to ask you this day to carve out a moment of time to get away from all the stresses of this world. Take a walk or find a place where you can sit that's peaceful and quiet. And I want you to look into his eyes in the midst of the storm in the boat and hear him say, quiet, be still. For I am your all-loving God, and I am your all-powerful God. Quiet, be still, do not be afraid.